What's going on, Legacy? Pastor Jordan here. I'm excited to talk today with our youth pastor, Pastor Chase Morris. We're going to be diving into our second week in our series, Good Intentions. Looking forward to it. Thanks for joining us. Let's get into it. Have you ever had like an awkward moment where there was this you were in a stressful moment and you responded like the figure of speech, foot and mouth, like, you're like, man, I wish I could have taken that back or handled this in a different way, or
just in a moment of transparency, within the last 2 years, I've become a husband, and I understand more now than ever that there's a right thing to say and a wrong time to say it, and it becomes the wrong thing if you say it at the wrong time.
For sure. I think in avoiding our goal to avoid stress, we kind of resort to our natural tendencies. One of mine is like joking and cutting the tension with that.
Jordan Morris is in the comments right now.
So one of mine funny stories is I went on a trip one summer with a friend and his family. And every night we would go to the outlet malls. We would walk around and shop. And so it was towards the end of the week. On this specific night, we went back into a store that we had gone in before, and I noticed we had been in there a long time, but I didn't see my friend and his family. And I was like, that's kind of weird. So I was walking around, and I noticed that they were talking to people that looked like they were from the store. I was like, okay, that's kind of strange. And so what I didn't know was that I was being actively accused of stealing the day before.
Dang.
Somebody fit a similar profile. I wore the same color shirt, all that, but I didn't know any of that. So my dumb self, I walk up, felt the tension, and was like, hey, let's get out of here. I'm afraid they're going to catch me. And as you can imagine, I was immediately placed in a corner that I didn't see coming.
What were the repercussions of that? Did they actually
I was defending myself for quite a while of like, no, I didn't steal from your store. I was just like, again, I was just being dumb trying to get out of there. Like, I didn't want to, I just felt the awkwardness of the moment and was like, let's get out of here.
You have a doppelganger out there. I just want you to know, in this town, like there is a guy that every time I'll go to see a basketball game at Lake Hamilton, there's a guy, he sits in the same spot every single time. And I look up and I'm like, there's Jordan.
Yep.
Every single time. And one time your wife was there.
He may have been in Destin a few
He
years ago,
may have been there.
Stealing from a store.
He's just here plotting his revenge on you.
Yeah.
Like he is coming after your life right now. But
For
literally
sure.
every time I'm there and every time Jordan's there, she's like, I swear, I think that guy is Jordan every single time. I see it. I'll ask him for a picture next time, even though it'll be awkward, just so you can see it.
For sure. Well, I think we can dive into today's topic. Last week we started a series with Pastor Tommy, just good intentions. And today we're talking about balancing that tension with discipline. And I was preparing for this and I was like, who's a character in the Bible that comes to my mind? Of course, there's tension all throughout the Bible, but I feel like Moses, the character of Moses, just his whole life from the beginning, being placed in the basket all the way through dealing with the Israelites and all of that, he dealt with tension.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this specific story in the book of Exodus 17 where just all of a sudden the Amalekite army is like going to battle. We're going to battle with the Israelites. And Moses is like, all right, Joshua, you head out to the battlefield. I'm going to go up with Aaron and Hur. We're going up the mountainside. We're going to battle this out. And so you see in that, like, there's this battle that's inevitable. There's this tension that we're going to deal with. Has there ever been like a season where you felt like life's pulling you in all these different directions and you had to lean on this discipline? For Moses, he's like, I've got this discipline of I'm going to pray.
Mm-hmm.
Joshua, you're going to go fight. I'm going to go pray. Has there been like a time in your life that like maybe it was a season that you saw coming, maybe it was a season that maybe you were kind of blindsided by it, but you're like, I've got to stay true to who I am, or maybe you didn't do that and you felt the repercussions of it.
I'll just say right now.
Yeah.
Like we're walking through it. I say we because most of where it comes from just the season that we're in as a church, that there's a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah.
Which is why somebody on a Sunday morning might be watching a podcast of us rather than hearing just a sermon, because just literally, like physically, we're in disarray all the time.
Yeah.
Being here. So there's so many moving parts happening right now. There's so much that it feels like the discipline is required, because most of the time it's very easy, very blessed to work at Legacy Church. It's pretty easy to balance life and ministry. Ministry is just a part of life. But right now, before you know it, you realize, oh, I've been up here 8 days in a row.
Yeah.
And I know that that's true for you too.
Right.
I've been up here 8 days in a row, and I'm not like trying to say, oh, poor pitiful us. It's a joy and a blessing to work here. But if you're not careful, you realize, oh, my life has gotten crazy. I haven't taken time to even pause.
Right.
I haven't gotten to be with my family. For you, which is your wife and kids. For me, it's just my wife. But I haven't even gotten to pause and just spend time with the people around me, because I've been so busy. And I know we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's coming to an end here soon, and we're excited
Praise
about
the
that.
Lord.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
And we're super excited about it. But for right now, there is that need to say, I got to be intentional with this. And thankfully, our pastor is sort of mandated us to be. He won't let us be too overrun by work here. But still, right now, this season that we're in, I found myself realizing more than I have in several years, probably, I'm overwhelmed. Plus, there's so many other things with life. You know, my wife's in her final semester of dental hygiene school. She's stressed out as well about school and working through all that stuff. It's just a whole lot all at once right now.
Definitely. I agree. The season's crazy. You know, I've had to rely more on my walk with Christ, like staying true to my disciplines of prayer, reading the word, like you said, overwhelmed at times where there's so many decisions to make that you're just like, you pause, you hesitate, you try to avoid it. You see in this story with Moses, we're guilty of, we sense stress coming and we do everything to avoid it. We want nothing to do with stress. We pay tons of money to figure out ways to get out of that stress. But in this moment, you see him like, hey, get the boys, y'all head to the battlefield. I'm heading up the mountain. We're going to face the stress head on. Why do you think that there's so many of us that maybe there's like that certain thing, maybe it's a culture thing, but our culture is just built on trying to find any way to escape it versus figuring out the way to balance life, stress, and in a godly way?
I think that we're really on both ends of the spectrum all at the same time. You know, we see the rise of like hustle culture, if you want to call it that, where people are like, I'm up at 5:30 a.m. And you see these like clips of influencers, and these guys are talking about they're up at 5:30, they're working till 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, dude, no way. Not sustainable. No. You know, you could maybe you go through seasons where you work that hard and you undergo that much stress and you can't help it, but you cannot live your life that way. Yeah. So one of the things that I think is most awesome about that story is Moses. I'm reading through, you know, the beginning of the Bible right now as well, since we're kind of at the beginning of the year.
Right.
And so I go through and I'm an underliner in my Bible. I just underline a lot. I got different colored pens for different things. And one of the things that I found myself is I'm like, I need a pen color specifically for leadership, because when you read through Moses' story, I'm like, this guy, not without flaws, obviously, just as any leader, but this guy exemplified leadership. And in that moment, he had the ticket right there, which is, y'all go do this. I've got to go be with the Lord.
Right.
So in those seasons, for instance, right now where we're at, just like you said, I know that there are certain times where I got to do the work. I'm busy. I'm here at the church. I'm focusing on this. I got deadlines for that. But then I have to set aside time. I've got to go be with the Lord, right? Or else this whole thing's going to fall apart. If we don't go spend time with the Lord, it's going to be a problem. So there's that hustle culture, but then there's also the rest culture that some people take too far. I think you have to, life's all about balance. Yeah. You know, you have to be able to balance and say, I need to set aside time. It's almost as if the Lord like sort of set it up that way. You know, the Sabbath, one of the 10 Commandments,
right?
God did it himself.
Deal.
Yeah.
Right.
It's almost like he knew us and knew that we needed rest, but also knew that we needed to work. God doesn't want us to rest 6 days a week and then work one day. He wants us to work 6 days and rest one day.
Yeah.
So it's about finding that balance.
Yeah, and I think in that comes the trust aspect, the faith. Like, I have to trust that on that one day, everything's going to be okay because it's God's anyways. It's in His control. But there's that thing inside of us that the ability to avoid control brings comfort, brings peace, like, because I can control the outcome. I have my hand to it. Whereas when I release it and I give it to God, it's like, at times in the beginning, there's more stress because I don't know what's going to happen. But in the long term, if I keep my hand on the situation, I just end up more stressed. Whereas if I would have just released it, it might have been a moment that turned into a lot longer.
Absolutely.
Have you ever seen like a picture, video, of somebody that's like walked on a high wire? Like,
yeah, I went to the circus when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Circus came to town, and I was, as an 8-year-old, just holding my breath for that guy up there.
I read the article the other day. There was a lady, I can't remember her name, but she like walked between the Twin Towers before they fell. And I saw the picture. She had this like large pole. I think they call it a counterweight. And I started thinking about that, like how, first off, you would never find me anywhere near, like never gonna go that way. But I started thinking about that and how she had the counterweight before she ever like got out there in the middle. Like, how crazy would it have been? She's out there in the middle between these two major buildings, just nothing but air and ground underneath her. And she's like, hey, could somebody throw me the counterweight? That wouldn't have happened. Like, that was a preconceived idea that I need something that keeps me grounded in this very stressful moment. So I wonder, for people listening, like, what are some of our ways in faith? Like, what can we do to have active, like, counterweights? I kind of view it as like, I've got my disciplines on one side and I've got my faith on the other side. What maybe practical steps can people take?
You're going to bring the youth pastor out in me right now, because I mean, this is what you preach, because in youth ministry, a lot of what we're focused on, just the church in general, but a lot of what we're focused on is a lot of these kids are getting saved for the first time and they don't know. Even the ones who grew up in church are really kind of getting to the point of maturity where they realize, I don't just want to walk this out. I have to walk this out. I'm going to fall away from my faith, just like I saw my friend who graduated last year. What happened to them? They were in church with me and now they're not following the Lord. How can I make sure that I am following the Lord the way that I'm supposed to be? So I always tell them, you got 4 pillars to your faith and your walk with the Lord. You have prayer, you have fellowship with other believers. So that's like being at church. You have worship, and you have reading your Bible. And I didn't come up with that, but those are 4 things where I'm like, man, if you can get those 4 things right and make those in your life something that you don't miss. Yeah. They're called pillars for a reason. Right. You lose one of them, things start to fall apart. Things start to fall down. So those things are sort of a counterweight in your life. When life gets busy, you don't need to neglect those things. You need to ramp those things up. Yeah. You need to be doing those things more than you were doing them before. And that's so difficult, but that's how we add balance to our life. In this season of my life, I find myself thinking, I need to get up just a little bit earlier to pray. But I went to bed later than I wanted to last night. Right. I was up, we had church last night. Right after church, I was kind of getting some things ready for today. I need to go to bed. It's a little later than I want to go to bed. Well, the solution is not sleep in. The solution is get a decent amount of sleep, but wake up and pray. Right. Make sure you read your Bible. Don't sleep in to the point where you just roll out of bed and go to work. For me, that temptation is something I feel, but I need to make sure I got to start my day with the Bible, because I'll read it at some point, but if I read it at night, that's not where I want to read it. I want to start my day with these sort of pillars of my relationship with God. Yeah, I think, not to keep using analogies, but I've been guilty, when you get like prescribed a medicine and you start to take it and you feel better. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, well, do I really need to finish that medicine? Yeah. I like have a hate for taking medicine. Yeah, for sure. Me too. But it's always like, if I stop taking it, I kind of resort back to the sickness that I had before because I didn't finish what I was prescribed. I think we're guilty of, I read my Bible once this week and I felt a little better. But then you get to the end of the week and you're like, well, why do I feel so bad? Why am I so anxious? Why am I so stressed out? Well, it's because God
desires a daily relationship, a daily habit that's formed with him that is going to sustain you through the battles, the high wires of life. And we tend to live life so far in the extremes that we're not grounded with, like that analogy with the counterweight on the high wire. We need that thing that's going to help us stay grounded to where we're not falling off. We're not shaken. It doesn't mean that we're not sad at times or stressed at times, but in the midst of that, we can have peace. We can have joy. So we see back in the story that we're talking about today with Moses. So they start this battle, and then you see the kind of the story unfold. So as Moses' hands are lifted, the Israelites win, but as he lowers his hands, the Amalekites start to win. And I had this thought, like, there's so much in there that you can unpack, but both positions, both Joshua and Moses, served the role that they knew. Like, they were both of them required each other to win that battle. And you don't see in the story like Moses shouting down the mountain like, "Hey Joshua, you're doing it all wrong."
Yeah, he's not a micromanager.
And then you don't see Joshua going, "Moses, could you actually come down here and grab a sword and get to fight?" Like, no, they both know that their hand in this battle plays and serves a role in the outcome. But then you see it continue to unfold there where Moses is doing the right thing, but he's still growing weary. And I think that's where we kind of like, we hit the eject too early, like I was talking about, where we're not seeing the results as fast as we want them to see. And we can be doing the right thing. We can be digging into our word. We can be praying hours a day, and we can still grow tired. We can still grow weary. So in that, we have to be careful, I think, to own up to it. So what is, like, what do you think is in us that keeps us from allowing the people around us? So you see later Aaron and Hur help, bring the stone, sit down on the stone. Moses' hands need to stay up, so they hold his hands up. What do you think we need to do in us to, like, surround ourselves with people that are going to help us and we're going to receive that help?
This is not like this is a shameless plug for our church. If you go to our church, this is on the internet, so you might you might not even be located near us, but finding a real community of people around you, and even, getting plugged in, not just attending church on Sunday morning. And that sounds like every pastor in the world has that exact same spiel and line. They all say it, and I'm sitting here saying it. But the reason is because before I ever worked in a church, before I was ever a pastor, I had a community in a church. Yeah. And that's probably a big part of why I work in a church and do it now. It's because I've seen the benefit of that and how God used that to impact and shape my life, and how it brought balance to my life, and how I don't know where I would be if it weren't for people that the only way that I know them is because of church, pastors in my life, leaders, people who aren't pastors, just people I served alongside. Yeah. Finding those people that are in your life that will lift your arms up when you're weak, that will help you and teach you how to occupy your role. Like you were talking about, Moses and Joshua, they occupy two very different roles. And throughout my life, I've occupied different roles. There's a lot of times as a youth pastor on a Wednesday night, I'm there sort of occupying that pastoral role. This whole service, I'm overseeing, I'm going to preach, I'm going to make sure that this service goes as it's supposed to go. A lot of times on a Sunday morning, I'm here to serve somebody else. I would go from Moses to Joshua. Pastor Tommy, he's leading this service. I'm here to do the legwork and make sure that man can do the spiritual part that he's here to do. And both are crucially important for every single person. Sometimes we have this hierarchy of where people rank and what's more important than the other thing. And none of it is. You need Moses and you need Joshua, and you need to be Moses and you need to be Joshua. Yeah. And also you need to be Aaron and Hur. You need to lift somebody else's hands up at some point as well. Yeah, for sure. I think that there's a pride involved in a lot of cases where, again, going back to the story, you don't see Moses saying, like, it's obvious his hands are dropping. And you don't see Moses faking it, the whole saying, like, fake it till you make it.
You don't see him doing that. You don't see him like Aaron and Hur like, hey, we're here to help. And no, I got it. I got it. I'm not gonna let my hands drop. I can do this. No, he owns it. He's like, I need help. I am growing weary. I need you to grab the stone for me to sit on and raise my hands up. I say this, like, I am a result of the people who have invested in me. Mm-hmm. I'm here today, like you said, because people took time. They saw the young man with the potential, even at times when I didn't see it in myself. And they saw the potential that was inside of me, and that I needed the help. I needed the guidance along the way. And again, I think when you are in the role of Moses in that story, I think we can grow weary when we don't see the results right away. Like we are, you've heard the analogy in the microwave generation. We want it now. And I think there's that concern, like if I don't see God move now, then I'm moving on. Like obviously he's not here. He's not in this. What would you say to somebody that's in a battle right now? Maybe they're in a Moses role. What would you say to somebody like in that discouragement? What would you say to them, like to hang on to in that battle?
I'll repeat something I said just a moment ago, that those moments are not the moments to take your foot off the gas and chill out. Those are the moments to like pedal to the floor, go after the Lord. And when I say that, just for anybody watching, just know I am not saying that I do that perfectly. I'm saying that even to myself, like in the season, there are moments where I got to prioritize my relationship with the Lord more and realize this is the most important time. This is where you make or break what God can do for you, because God can, he can fix it all, right? We know that. We believe that. In your most stressful situations, God can come in and just wipe that stress away. This is what I know about God. He wants us to pursue him. He wants us to go after him in those moments. So that's one thing I would say is keep your foot on the gas, and not just keep it on the gas, but pedal to the metal, go after the Lord in that season. But also, I feel like having moments, our pastor calls them anchor moments, and I've sort of adopted that terminology as well in my life. And so those moments where you look back and you realize, this is what God called me to do. This is what God blessed me with. For me in this season, God called me to be a pastor and be in the ministry. It's one of the greatest things that I've ever been able to do. And I remember that moment whenever I was at church camp and I felt the Lord call me into ministry. And that's been 15, probably more years ago now. And I look back on that moment, it still means something to me. It'll still keep me going. If you are a parent out there, God chose you to be the parent of that child. That's a blessing and a privilege. Hold on to that moment where like God gave you this gift. And I know that as somebody who's not a parent yet, I know it's overwhelming. You can speak more to that than I can, but I know it's overwhelming. You have another human life in your hands that you feel the responsibility for. And just those moments all along the journey that you can look back on and say, you know what, I have a responsibility. Sometimes that feels, it puts more weight on you to say, I have another human life in my hand. God trusted me with one of his children to be my child. But that's just another moment where you can respond and say, I've got to go after the Lord and he's going to help me. He chose me to do it and didn't say, figure it out. He chose me to do it and said, I'm going to help you along the way, only if I pursue after him in the midst of it.
Yeah, I think, on the other side of, like, as we face the tension, as we face the battle, God's looking like for us as we endure it. On the other side of it is the miracle. Like you see in the story, on the other side of him keeping his hands up, they eventually win the battle. But I noticed too, like Moses's prayer wasn't, hey, pluck us up out of this battle, like remove this from us. We're guilty of that. Like, God, just take away this hard time. Like, just help me get out of it. I want to avoid it altogether. Kind of back to what we're talking about with the stress, especially as a parent, you see that with your kids, you see them struggling at school, or they've got that bully around them, or you've got that sickness and you're like, man, if I could just take that off of them. You have something in you that's like, I don't want you to be in pain. But I had a friend tell me once, like, to pluck somebody up out of life's battles is to steal the teaching, learning moments that God was intending them to grow from.
Mm-hmm.
God may not be the orchestrating factor of like bringing this season on, but you can count on that A, he's right there with you, and B, he's going to use it for your good. And so I've kind of taken that approach as like, I'm not going to pluck my kid up out of life's toughest moments, but I'm going to be that Moses for him. Just
Absolutely.
like when I'm in life's battles, I need a Moses and an Aaron and a Hur that's praying for me on the mountain, that are speaking into my life. So what do you think, as we're kind of wrapping this up, what's like one practical step, like this week? Somebody's watching this week. What do you think is like one practical step that someone could take to strengthen their discipleship or their disciplines, or maybe even just take that first step?
My mind works like really practically. So people give advice and it's like sort of out there or whatever. It just doesn't work in my mind. I don't know what it is. I don't like when it comes to motivational speaking and things like that. I'm like, tell me what to do. That's just sort of the way my mind works. So I would say like go and whatever it is, for any different discipline that you want, you've got to pursue a way to say, how can I just genuinely make sure that I do the thing that I need to do? So I'm a very researched person. I don't say that to like say I'm like a really smart person. I'm just saying I chronically cannot make a decision without researching it.
I
Is
very
really
heavily rely on YouTube.
Yeah,
YouTube tutorial.
100%. The amount of time I spend on YouTube is we're not going to talk about it today.
Yeah.
But whatever it is. So for instance, reading my Bible, that throughout my life for a long time was a struggle. I could find myself praying. Praying was not a struggle. Some people struggle with that. They're like, I just forget to pray. I get through the whole day and I forget to pray. That was not a struggle for me. It was at one point, but it's like I had figured out prayer, but I hadn't figured out reading my Bible. How in the world can I do it? And I tried everything. Here's the thing. If you try something that doesn't work, try something else is one bit of advice. I tried setting reminders on my phone. It would just slip my mind still. I tried doing reading plans. And like Pastor Tommy, he said it this past Sunday, you had the intention of doing a Bible reading plan at the beginning of the year. And by January 7th, you've missed 6 days. That was me for a long time in my life. One thing that I found that works now to be consistent in reading my Bible, because our jobs demand that we spend some time in the Word, but I don't ever want to be somebody who doesn't spend time in the Word for myself. That the only time I ever read the Bible is so I can go preach something. That's a terrible way, just as a pastor, to live. And so I didn't want to be that way. The thing that's helped me, my wife and I sat down and we both said, we struggle in this area. We started keeping each other accountable. And it doesn't have to be, if you don't have a spouse or whatever, it doesn't have to be a spouse, but that's just one area. Whatever discipline you're trying to keep, there's something that one of the most dangerous things we can do is just give up and say, I guess I'm not going to figure this out, or think that something that isn't working is working. Don't try to convince yourself. If it's not working, you're not a bad Christian. God isn't mad at you. He doesn't hate you, nothing like that. But just be honest with yourself. It's not working for me. What I'm trying to do to keep this discipline, I'm not disciplined in it. It's not working. What can I do? What I found as somebody who would describe myself as an introvert, and in a lot of ways in my life, I am an introvert, but people are what I need to help me accomplish things. I need people around, even though it's not my natural inclination all the time. But when I started reading my Bible with a person to keep me accountable, all of a sudden, I haven't missed a day in, 70 some days, however many days we're in on the year. I was reading my Bible in different ways, but I decided this is going to be the year I'm going to stick with a reading plan all the way through this entire year. And there might be some people thinking he's a pastor. How has he never done that before? I get to January 14th and I get off track, and then I'm reading something else and I want to go read the book of James, and I get tired in Leviticus. It's tough. It's tough to read.
Yeah.
So this year I'm like, how am I going to do it? What I was doing isn't working.
Yeah.
Here's what's going to work. I get a person in there with me. I get somebody that sometimes it's the end of the day and I forgot to read my Bible. This happened last week. I just forgot to read my Bible that day. It's 9:30 at night. And Jordan says, did you do your Bible reading today? And I'm like, I got to go read Leviticus at 9:30 at night now. Wasn't my choice.
Yeah.
But I did it. I had somebody to help me keep the discipline.
Right.
So pursue something until you find something that works.
Isn't it the irony? And like, people are the thing that frustrates you the most, but that you need the most. Like
everybody except for my wife, not you, sweetheart.
Right. Yeah. I wasn't talking about my wife either,
Yeah.
but other people
Exactly. Yes.
Frustrate you the most,
Mhm.
but you desperately need that
For sure.
community. I think to reemphasize what Pastor said last week is just do the next right thing.
Mhm.
Like just take a step. I think you can get overwhelmed and like, okay, if you're not praying 7 hours a day and reading through 14 chapters of the Bible, then you're obviously not a dedicated Christian.
Mhm.
Like, no,
Yeah.
like just if you aren't reading full chapters, just read a verse.
Yeah.
Just start praying like a minute.
Mhm.
There's the practical steps like using reminders. For me, I use a reminder on my phone with all the different prayer things. Like if you asked me, hey, would you be praying for me? I'm going to plug that into my reminder app. And those things are great. But like I said, you can get overwhelmed in thinking, building it up in your mind. And I think that's where the enemy thrives in thinking like, hey, you'll never be good enough. So just don't start.
Yep.
Just don't talk today because you'll never have enough time and you have to give this much.
Mhm.
And he thrives in discouragement to just get you just enough discouraged that you just, well, I'll just give that discipline up.
Yeah. If he can't get you to like blatantly sin, he'll just get you to be lazy.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to be lazy.
It's so easy, but it just do the next right thing
Mhm.
and be confident in that God will use that step to build on the next step, to build on the next step. And eventually you'll find yourself in the deep end of the pool. Like, man, I'm digging into God's word. I'm diving deeper than I ever have.
Yeah.
I'm spending that 30 minutes, hour praying when it used to be just a minute and it used to be 2 minutes. And so I think just do the next right thing is the discipline that you can take that practical step this week for wherever you're at in your journey.
Yeah.
Everybody has that next step. So let's end it like on a word of encouragement. Maybe somebody's listening and they're in the middle of that battle. They're on the battlefield of life. They're dealing with the stress of work or the family that's torn apart or whatever the situation is. They're in life's battle. What would you say to somebody that's just like, I'm barely hanging on. I need somebody or I need that thing.
Yeah. Get a person in your life or people in your life. And this is not trying to just be like a big advertisement for ministries that we do here at Legacy Church. But the thing is, the people in our church are not for the ministries. The ministries are for the people. That's what we don't sit around coming up with ideas because, you know, we don't have enough going on here at the church. We just need more stuff to do around here. That's not the case. We have a lot of stuff going on, but why do we say, hey, in the midst of even a renovation, why are we going to launch something like the seasonal classes that we're doing right now? Why are we going to continue pressing forward with community groups? Why are we going to
parent conference?
Why are we going to do a parent conference?
Yeah.
Why are we even adding more chairs to our sanctuary in the first place? The reason is because not only are we here to worship God, you can worship God at home.
Yeah.
That's just the truth. You can be in your car worshiping God.
Yeah.
We come here to not forsake the assembling of believers because God intended us to be in community with one another. We look back at the early church, and that's our model. Things look different now, but it's sort of our model.
Yeah.
They did everything together. What the Bible says is they considered nothing to be their own. They were like family.
Yeah.
They were there for each other, highs, lows, whatever it is, they were there. That's what this house is really about. And that's one thing that I love about our church. Take me out of the equation. Take me out of the equation as far as being a pastor and on staff here. I tell people if I didn't work here, I would want to go to church here because there are so many great people here. That there are people in this church that I'm like, I can count on. I'm quote unquote pastor on staff. There are people in the church that'll lift me up. Yeah. Like they will be the ones to lift my arms. And that is just, it's incredible. I hate the idea that there are people out there, especially people in our church that just come in and go out and they struggle with things in life. They're lacking discipline. They're wondering, what is it? I'm at my wit's end here. My family's messed up. My home's messed up. I'm constantly struggling with this or that. Why can I seem to never get joy? Why can I never find peace? Why can't I find what I so desperately want? I'm praying to the Lord. And for some people, it's like the Lord's telling you, like, look what I'm giving you, and you're not taking advantage of. People get on your nerves. People frustrate you. people are what we need.
Yeah.
They're all, even the people that make you the most angry, they carry the image of God and they can bring blessing to your life.
Yeah, and I think the biggest lie, or one of the biggest lies we can give into, especially when we're in the midst of a battle, is to isolate.
Mm-hmm.
That's
huge.
The devil's playground. He wants you because he knows if I get them isolated, I've got them right where I want them.
Yeah.
But it's when we step into that community, and it's when we balance our life with discipline. That's when we witness the miracle, when we become victorious. It's because, you know, when we stay true to where the path that God has brought us to, or is seeing us on, and we're facing the stress, we're in the tension. When we surround ourselves with a community of believers, we're uplifted. That's where our Aaron and Hur comes from. That's the people who are going to raise my hands up when I can't lift them anymore. Yeah. I don't feel like lifting them. I'm struggling. I rely on people. Again, it's the irony in I don't want anything to do with people because they frustrate me, but I desperately need them because they're the ones that are going to lift me up. And so that's my encouragement, is don't give in to the lies of the enemy that I can do this on my own. You didn't see Moses do it. He relied on his people, his tribe.
Moses. We're talking about Moses
the
here
character
in the Bible.
of Moses.
We are talking about the dude from the Bible who parted the Red Sea and wrote like the first 5 books of the Bible.
He needed people.
He needed people.
Yeah.
Don't be so arrogant to think you don't.
Yeah.
That's a message for me today too.
Yeah.
But
we're arrogant. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Just swallow your pride, rely on people, get grounded into the word, get grounded into your prayer life. And I believe that through that, it's still a process. It may take time, but we're going to see the victories come to pass. And that's the goodness of God. God's blessed us with people. He's blessed us with his word and his presence. And I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that he gave us these things that we can rely on to keep us grounded. So anyways, glad we got to talk today.
Absolutely.
And it's been a joy. I hope that it's blessed somebody, and look forward to talking again in the future.
Absolutely. I know we're not the faces. There's
no
Pastor.
Faces.
There's no Pastor Tommy in this episode. Pastor Nathan's been on several of them.
Right.
They don't know this. We're in competition with them right now to get the most likes on one of our podcasts. So make sure
share this.
Yeah, share it, like it. They don't know that we're in competition, but Pastor Jordan and I just want to beat them. At their own game here.
That's right. That's right. We're gonna go viral.
I'm hoping for it. Hopefully this actually was good enough that you do want to like it and share it, and it's not just because I asked you to. Hopefully you've liked it before now.
All right. Well, God bless. Have a great week.